So I'm Richard Muirhead. I'm one of the co-founders of Fabric and managing partner. And I'm going to just try and introduce the day a little bit. I'm going to try and maybe slightly petrify you, but try and balance that out with a little bit of excitement about what the opportunity for us is today. And I will go through the agenda in a second. But I wanted to start actually with a little story. So this last Saturday was actually the birthday of one of my heroes, Prince, who obviously 20 different instruments, composer, writer, producer, incredible creative genius, quite a small creative genius, but prolific. And so, as is the way with these days, I wondered who else was born on Saturday, June the 7th. And so I did a little chat GPTing and discovered some curious little connections. So, also born on Saturday, well, not Saturday, June the 7th, about 1,000 years ago, was Emperor Huizong of Song, actually, coincidentally, who was a great calligrapher, was a great composer, and actually a patron of the arts in the kind of feudal sense. And so back in the day, of course, that was the way that creativity was allowed to flourish, that it was sponsored by royal decree. You didn't necessarily get that much chance to be creative if you were struggling to subsist. Also born on that day, was, and I'm a bit of an Elvis fan, but in this case it's Dean Martin, who I just learned was apparently called Dino Martini or something when he sort of first kicked off. And he built, incredibly, a brand, a global brand, before people understood the significance of building brands like that. And that transcended different types of creativity, from crooning through to movies, and obviously the Rat Pack in Vegas. And he was funded by what has become the kind of well-established entertainment industry. The studios, he relied on the studios and their patronage, musical studios, television studios, and so forth. And allegedly also possibly the mafia, or was that Frank Sinatra? I'm not sure, but there was that kind of patronage. And then there was Prince, who, in many ways, personified the beginning of the rebellion against that particular form of funding creativity. Famously, of course, becoming the artist formerly known as Prince, and instead represented by this symbol and appearing on stage with slave emblazoned on his cheek. And all of those, I think, go to illustrate together how fundamental to human identity is creativity, and how fundamental is the way in which that is respected and nurtured and fostered and funded. And Prince had a few portentous things to say on the topic back in the first wave of the internet. And this was about the time that David Bowie likened the internet to an alien life form, and not just a sort of form of distribution, means of distribution, as Jeremy Paxman had described it. And Prince said this, and hopefully this will work.
One thing I wanted to say is Don't be fooled by the internet. It's cool. It's cool to get on the computer, but don't let the computer get on you. It's cool. It's cool to use the computer. Don't let the computer use you. You all saw The Matrix. There's a war going on. The battlefield's in the mind. And the prize is the soul. So, just be careful. Be very careful. Thank you.
So, what I'm attempting to underline there is how important this juncture is right now. That was at the point at which the web in its first incarnation appeared and the internet appeared, and that's how apparent the stakes were. All of that is accelerated by the age of AI. And so I wanted to cast back to those of you who listened or watched or attended last time to look at our character Beth here, who we went through a kind of a day in the life with her when she's becoming fully immersed in the opportunities of AI, and see how easy it is to forget to be careful about given the opportunities of this age. And so actually we wrote in our thesis a year ago a little kind of rundown of different activities she might enjoy. And so I'm going to kind of skate through these a little bit, but we've taken that text and then matched them up to some companies that already existed, some companies that are fresh today. So 11 Labs already existed. It's a European success story, generating voice with incredible fidelity. Ava is something that we've invested in quite very recently, helping that most important segment on the planet, that is mothers, to be more successful in running their households. Later on, we'll hear from Tom from Fixer, who's looking to ensure that we don't get too inundated by our inbox. And then we've got Hippocratic AI here. I mean, who here has put a medical result into ChatGPT and got a pretty reasonable output, something at much lower cost and far greater speed? And there are verticalized, applications that are being built right now that do even better than this. And this one here, it's just on 150 million Series B, has got a video-style, Zoom-style interface to it, but is all generated by AI. And then Insightful is something that's mainly applied in the workplace, but looks and sees, are you getting tired? It looks at like flickers of the eye and how your head is tilting and maybe changes to your physiology and can recommend how you spend your time. Convergence, backed here in the UK by Balderton. And those guys sort of think of it as having an intern at your disposal to go and do some research and do some analysis and bring back the results for you, but with natural language prompting. We have Soulmate there, which helps you with your dating. And who here has heard the phrase, not your keys, not your Bitcoin? So I think I'd maybe, and people roughly get what it is, you should custody your own Bitcoin, or at least have possession of the keys. Someone introduced me to the phrase, not your weights, that is in algorithmic weights for the AI, not your wifey. The point being, who do you want deciding, which algorithms do you want deciding who it is that you're going to spend your time at dinner with, for example? These are important questions. And then we have Zing coaches that are looking at your form when you're exercising. And then you have a recent discovery of mine, 10x. Anyone have come across that? So it's a robotic tennis instructor being funded on Kickstarter currently. And it can, of course, pick up the balls, but it can also run around and serve any shot you want. And it watches your form and plays with you and so forth. And then Loop Crypto in our portfolio for dealing with the payments. And then who here has heard about the acquisition of LoveFrom by OpenAI for $6.5 billion? Pretty good result for those involved. So we don't even know what their product is yet, device, but it's a step in the direction of if you're so immersed in AI, both giving up your data and also being notified that you're going to need different devices from phones in order for that to work effectively. So already you can see how our lives are going to be augmented, and we're just at the beginning of that. And I think we've got here hyper-intelligent software that is going to infiltrate our lives. We're going to have hyper-intelligent robots, physical robots. I was talking earlier with Mike Hearn about humanoid robots and how that is, like the ChatGPT experience, is probably going to happen to us extremely suddenly from our perspective, and suddenly they're going to be amongst us given the pace of development. And we're probably going to have hyper-intelligent robots not just in our lives but in our bodies. And some people might know here that I broke my arm in a fight with a swan about a decade ago, and so I have a steel and titanium implant. So maybe this is my augmented future as it sort of starts to degrade. The recurrent theme there, the underlying point, is that we are increasingly giving up a lot of our data. And if I went and did a little prompt to ChatGPT, I said, construct a picture of Richard on the basis of a few photos it could find on the internet. Actually, I think it probably demonstrates some of the limitations so far, because I don't think it's just me, but I don't think it looks so much like me. But anyway, that was one prompt. But there is another prompt that you can use, which is kicking around on the table in front of you, which you can put into ChatGPT and ask it to produce a list of information that it knows about you. And one of the reasons this is becoming increasingly potent is because it is now memorizing, across different conversations, the context that you're giving it. Who was aware in this room that it was doing that? Who's given it permission to do more of that? Yeah, reasonable show of hands. And so when I did that and I produced this output, you see some interesting facts. And this is, of course, the thin end of the wedge. You saw that, in fact, I was seeking aggressive legal representation, which, taken out of context, might go the wrong direction. It said, apparently I've got genealogical ties to historical figures. Who knew? It's an interesting one. And that the user is a father of two daughters, one of whom is here. What it also happens to know, but I've not highlighted here, is that this particular one likes lilac and mint choc chip ice cream, and that the other one prefers banana, and that I have a cocker spaniel called River, and I have a Maine Coon cat called Rosie with a head tilt. So it knows all of that information from different prompts that have gone in there. It also apparently knew that I was half Brazilian and half Colombian and half English, and I grew up in Brazil, which is actually incorrect. And the reason it thought that is because Zoe had commandeered a prompt and done a little bit of research on that, and so it had got a bit confused. All of which is to illustrate it's important to understand what information is being gathered, because all of that is going to be used out of sight by us going forward. And we don't need to be worried just that there's going to be some, personification of evil, whether it be Zuckerberg or whether it be any of the other kind of tech titans, that is going to deliberately seek to cause us harm. The reality is that there's an immense race going on, and these are, of course, some of the leaders in that race from a foundational model perspective. And that once you are in a race like that, and it's an institution racing, that corners get cut because they're optimizing for their commercial outcomes, and no one individual is responsible, it's the collective. And then also, when it's an institution doing that, you have a kind of blunting of a moral compass, if that isn't some kind of weird mixed metaphor. And so I think we need to be fearful of that also. Another slant on it is actually this race, even though this, of course, is roughly depicting a Formula One race, although it's sort of AI generated. And Formula One is kind of European, and the UK is very strong in Formula One. These are all Chinese and American contenders in this race. Those are the people who are harvesting the information. And it goes further than that. It's not just the fact that there's a race and corners are going to be cut. It's the fact that the architecture that these entities sort of gravitate towards is one that is very centralized. And when something is centralized and designed top-down, it's very hard to get right. It's not very hard to make adaptive to the needs of many. And I think over the last decades, we've demonstrated that computing architectures that are open are actually both superior in outcome and more resilient. You can avoid central points of failure around security. You can avoid central points of failure around corruption. And you're far more likely to be able to cope with, as actually I was just talking to Ahmad earlier, described it, many different types of alignment. There's no one, there's no homogeneous average person in the world. There are many individuals. There are many collectives, tribes, cities, nations, and so forth. We need to be able to cope with all of them in a very fluid and adaptive way. And in order to do that, we need a very sophisticated way of managing incentives. How is this manifesting so far out there in the world? So who's come across Stack Overflow? Who uses Stack Overflow? So it's a Q&A platform that actually, when this graph kicked off back just before the my second company got bought, Joel Spolsky was a hero of a lot of the developers in my team, and he created it. And it went on and got $6 million funding from Union Square Ventures, and they built this highly curated, verticalized sort of community with questions and answers. You can go in there and find the answer to your technical question very easily. And then over time, as you see it kind of flattening out, they moderated and curated it very effectively. And Spolsky, with actually great foresight, sold it to private equity for $1.8 billion at this point in time. ChatGPT launches here and starts just absorbing all of that information and becoming a far better place for people just to go and have those questions answered. Then there was, of course, this is pretty calamitous, there was some kind of final sort of death embrace from ChatGPT or OpenAI when they did a deal with them just shortly before, I would argue or speculate, their value has declined to zero. So that's one example. And what we've seen is that we've kind of characterized them here as the kind of AI ring wraiths, if you will. Their appetite for hunting down the data that will fuel their growth is the definition of insatiable. And already there have been, Meta has been fined $2 billion for violating GDPR laws within the EU. The state of Texas has fined them as well for actually using biometric data they shouldn't have been using. There have been examples again around Clearview. We know that Reddit is suing Anthropic for using their information without permission. I speculated actually because I think Sam Altman actually owns 7% of Reddit, so I don't know how that whole dynamic works between the different players. But again, a demonstration of the perils of sort of centralization. So this is ongoing, and the answer is not going to happen, or it's not going to come from consumers. We're all familiar with this little dialog box popping up on websites to deal with sharing our data in the age of advertising. Who just accepts everything every time? Hands up. Who? Oh, come on, more. Who ignores, says no, nothing? I'm not going to share anything. God, this is actually a wiser bunch than average. So on average, it's like 70 or 80%. It's in that region. Just go accept all. So even at the point of the consumer who becomes complacent, this doesn't operate. But it's worse than that because this is already fighting yesterday's battle. We're now moving on from websites that are optimized for sharing that information to get us to come back and buy products, to websites that actually the results are going to come through an interaction with a chat like ChatGPT, or in fact they're not going to happen with humans at all. They're going to happen between agents talking. So the people are optimizing their sites for something entirely different. And we have seen legislation being pushed through from the House of Commons and turned down by the House of Lords repeatedly. And in that particular instance, to pick one item in it, the burden has been pushed to the user to decide to proactively opt out of sharing your data with these foundational models, which to my mind is a little bit like kind of guilty until proven innocent rather than the other way around. And I don't think it's ever going to be the case that you can be able to solve this problem in a timely fashion with either consumer action or with legislation and regulation. What we think is that you need a more bottoms-up approach that is baked in, no pun intended, to the architecture that's being built. It's our own little version of cakeism. We have Sir Jeremy Hunt MP coming in later, and of course his colleague Boris was famous for his cakeism post-Brexit. In this cakeism, we think you can have the power of AI, you can have the knowledge and reasoning it brings, and there's some of the examples of the further innovations that are being built there. You can add to it cryptography, which can move us to a situation where we can, and one phrase used for this is protocolize privacy. In the same way as you can rely on a blockchain to have a trustless transaction with a third party you'd never met, you can actually rely on the network to preserve the privacy the way in which you would want it to be. Probably with your own sovereign agent making that representation and setting those configurations for you. And that we can track the contributions you're making when you are sharing the information fully, have full provenance on it, and reward you as appropriate. So it's private, you get the provenance, you get paid. And then all of this can operate in a highly distributed manner across all of the different forms of embodied AI and wearables and whatever it is that Johnny and Mark and the team at Lovefrom are producing and you're going to wear in your top pocket or back pocket. So that's where we think we're heading. And we think that this, as we will see in the agenda today, is already having mainstream impact in the way we change in which we make payments and we do on-chain banking, and the way in which we move towards agentic commerce when we delegate responsibility to agents to do our bidding, is already making an impact in the way in which the games run, and they can be infinitely modifiable, the way in which we can own parts of them, the way in which we may own not just our capital, but our social capital in new forms of Web3 social media, and the way in which we live our lives. And there are examples here of data being collected for navigation. There's going to be data collected for healthcare. And we've got our Frodo-bot representative here somewhere, so you can go and interact with him at some point. And we are pushing further with our program of collaboration that we call FabricX, one that's focused on the entrepreneurs right at the beginning of their journeys, when they're still ideating, when they're still brainstorming, which is what this diagram is meant to represent. And we've got a couple of cities rolling out. We had a great program that was run by my partner Max in Paris. We have London that is coming about with Coinbase, Animoca, and Founders Factory, and Dubai with the regulatory authority, Immerso and Dubai World Trade Center, and perhaps your city next. That's part of our broad sort of FabricX program. And then getting to the agenda, we're about to go live with Ken Kukier and Emad and Mike and Ilya to talk about how the future will expectedly or unexpectedly unfold. Then we've got the fireside chat with Sir Jeremy, and then 3 panels which take us right across those different sectors I spoke about, but also through the stack that we've been touching upon. And then we might have a surprise fireside chat during dinner. So thank you very much for listening to me. In all of this, there's a bewildering set of opportunities and also complexity. The best way, and I see many people who are already doing this in the audience, the best way to make sure it ends up the way we want it to is to actually build it. And let's not leave that just to Elon Musk. Thanks very much.